Hey everyone, so I don't know how well this is going to go, but I'm going to just sort of free associate here for a bit on an idea I had and posted about a while back on Google Plus about tabletop role-playing games. Mainly the question of, well, what are we rolling against? In so many games, let's talk about that for a bit. I mean, pretty much every game on this shelf is about rolling against a monster, or rolling against a person, or rolling against some static difficulty number. What if we change that around a bit? Here's the thing. That's fine if you're doing a dungeon crawl. And yes, by the way, I know there are role-playing games that don't do this, but that's what I want to talk about here. So if you're doing a dungeon crawl, that's great. If you're doing action, that's great. You've got a clear antagonist. We know how to handle that. I want to handle this. Okay? I also want to handle... Where is it? This. I want to be able to role-play that. I also want to role-play, let's say... Another good example. Oh, even better. Where is that book? Is it paperback or not? And I'm not seeing it. There we go. I want to role play this. So these are stories that role-playing games are really poor at simulating. How could we simulate those? Well, there are some options, and I'm going to swing around here while I work on something else, because I think this is worth thinking about and talking about. Whoops. It's also worth having power. There we go. So, how could we grow the whole idea of rolling against things? Well, what are we rolling for? What is the whole idea of rolling? Rolling is all about randomizing a story. It's saying that we recognize that there are some parts of a story. I'm fixing my 3D printer. There are parts of a story where we don't want to know what happens. We don't want total control over what happens. We want to be surprised by the outcome as players and as kind of an audience. This is one of the difficult things about role-playing games, is that we are both, in a traditional media sense, we're both the writer and the reader at the same time in a very real way. So the question becomes, how does the story remain fresh? We do that through randomization. Now, Gygax, Arneson and Company had the idea, based off of war games, to say, well, we randomize the outcome of specific attacks, specific attempts to do things, that kind of thing. That's fine. But what if you look from a larger drama perspective? What if we're rolling against the mystery? What if, let's just say, taking Dune there as an example, what if we want to, what if we set up this idea that we are members of a noble house, and we have been given this this gift, this planet that we're going to go to, and we know that it's dangerous. We know that there's some danger involved, and we know that some of the people there are going to be our enemies. We don't know who. So what if our randomization was to say, every time we encounter a new character, does this person give us a clue or not? Does this person help us or hinder us? Does this person initiate some conflict or not? And maybe that's not even the best way of doing it. Maybe every character initiates some kind of conflict, but we randomize the nature of that conflict. So, for example, imagine if we arrive on the planet, and one of the first people we meet is the housekeeper, the chief housekeeper. And so we're going to roll to see if that housekeeper or we're going to roll to see what relationship that housekeeper has to us. You know, the person sort of keeping the day-to-day operations going. Is that a mysterious person? Is that somebody who gives us valuable information? Is that somebody who is completely closed off to us? Things like that. What if we could roll against that? And more importantly, what if we are rolling to what if we're rolling to further the story, not so much our characters? I.e., what if the stats we have, what if the things we're dealing with are not so much about our character's success, but more about the success of the story, if you will, making an interesting story? Now, this is something I've only just begun to think about, but it's an interesting idea that we are so used to saying you will play a character, or you will at least be guiding some character or some set of characters. What if we said, you know, you're going to create a character, and in fact, you're going to create multiple characters, probably, and you're going to kind of guide them through this story. But it's not so much about rolling that character's stats against the conflict, because that's not how drama works. Drama isn't about saying, you know, this character is put in a situation that he or she can control, or that is perfectly suited to that character's skills. It's about putting the character in a situation that the character is not suited for, right? You know, Anna Karenina is interesting because Anna has her own issues that she has to deal with, and she is terrible at being somebody's mistress, frankly. So why don't we design games that reward that reward us reacting to a story that is problematic for our character, right? It's sort of the opposite of optimization. What if we are rewarded as role players for failure? Really, that's drama. Failure is drama. We should really be rolling the opposite, because we should be getting our characters in tough situations and seeing how they squirm. That's how writers work, right? So, getting back to the earlier idea, what if, and I'm going to shut this whole thing off. So what are the larger scale issues that we could deal with? Well, I already mentioned the relationship of a character to us, the relation of a character to us. But there can also be a larger mystery. You know, in this case, you know, what is the specific trap that is inherent in this planet that we've come to? You know, what is the problem that's going to rise to challenge us, and then what do we do as a result? I mean, I think a lot of that, what do we do as a result, can come down to, you know, can be defined to the character, but those should be more like tags. Those should be more like individual words, adjectives, nouns that describe our character, as opposed to saying, you know, I am good at one of these 6 things, right? Our fictional characters are defined by their attitudes and their personalities, not their strength, not their intelligence. Much as we love the idea of intelligence and wisdom and charisma and so forth, and as useful as abstractions as they are as abstractions, they are too abstract to deal with mystery, to deal with anything that's not a concrete day-to-day action. I've had some folks complain to me that that is what everything is. Everything comes down to behavior. So that's what stats should be. Well, yeah, I hear where you're coming from on that, but that's kind of like saying that people may not have intelligence because they don't. Because I'm not phrasing this correctly or helpfully. People are more than just a collection of behavior. That behavior comes from somewhere. We have perspectives and attitudes and beliefs that inform our behavior, and that should be the core of role-playing. Good example of this is in D&D 5e. Like it or dislike it, one of the most interesting things about D&D 5e is that it explicitly gives you some background for your character. It gives you a hook for where your character came from and thus why he or she is skilled in a certain way. Right? That's dramatically interesting. Something I'd like to see a lot more of. Baked into games. And yes, there are plenty of games that do that, but that's something that we often tend to ignore in game design. We focus so much on those individual character attributes, on the how easily can he or she break down a door, and not on why is that person so pumped. Where does that desire come from? That's a much more interesting question than how much the person can deadlift. So we have mystery. We have NPCs. Let's look at some of these things. You also have just larger unseen forces. You have things like magic, things like political systems, governmental systems, legal systems that can impact your characters that are still often unanswered questions in the game. You may know how those are supposed to work, but you don't necessarily know how they're going to impact the character. Think Casablanca. If you wanted to run a game in the movie Casablanca, there are all these things going on in the city that can potentially impact the lives of the characters. And that's interesting drama. And that's the kind of thing that should be a part of a conflict. Those should be concerns for the characters. Now, certainly, you can just role play that. You can assume all that is being role played. What I'm saying is, what tools can we build into games to better facilitate keeping that stuff in mind? This can all just be role played, and I just need the numbers. I acknowledge that, but then you can just say, well, we don't need game systems at all, which we don't. But the reason we have these games is to have a structure to help us to frame our imaginations, right? It's a way to funnel us in a certain direction, just like a writer's prompt will help get a writer's mind aimed in a certain direction. It's helpful. That's what I want to look at there. So one of the other things that kind of frustrates me is the whole idea of thinking in terms of numbers, thinking in terms of 13 better than 12. So what if we can use dice to represent relative power? I'm just thinking out loud here, as opposed to just these specific numbers. While I think about that, I want to see if anyone is watching. I kind of doubt it. I just want to see if I have any comments at all on this. Oh, I'm going to the wrong place. Do I have a comment section? I do. Let me just look this up here. I don't know if this is even visible publicly. There's somebody. There's a +1. Okay, that's fine. Somebody responded to, but I don't see any comments. You post, maybe? Let's see. Maybe they're just sort of saying, yes, I'm watching. Okay, yeah. So that's the thing, is this question of looking at dice and randomization in general as an important thing. Okay, so actually, not trying to avoid the question here too much, but let me, now that I have this going, I need to actually get this started. So let me try this and see if I can get this printing. The reason I'm doing this is I want to see if I can get this printing going, printer going again. Had some issues. Here's hoping. That's a very kinky. Okay, that's probably part of the problem. All right. I'm beginning to see one of the kind of issues here. Looks like I may just have a bum spool of plastic. Get that in there. Feed down. All right. So we have a couple of basic ideas in terms of rolling against NPCs, against mysteries, and against large external forces. Of course, all three of those can interact, but for the purposes, for our purposes here, those are sort of conceptual differences that we can think about. Let me get some of this plastic extruded so I can start this print. Wait till it's coming out cleanly. That's not bad. Ugh. Actually, it is kind of bad. Let's see. I think the print head's a little clogged. Okay. That's better. Perhaps that was the problem. I may have had a significant amount of problematic plastic around the nozzle. That might explain why there was an issue. Okay. Just get that off there and start this job. Yeah, I think I just go. Yeah, good. So let's think. So we want to, and again, this is kind of upending general role-playing advice. So let's go further. What if we rolled at the beginning of a scene instead of at the end? So what if instead of determining the outcome of a scene, we roll to determine the parameters of the scene? Not all the parameters, but getting back to the earlier question, what if we said, okay, we have this cool thing, we have something we're dealing with. What if we roll to determine how the world responds or is responding to us in this scene? Think, what is it, 3 Days of the Condor, where the main character is in his workplace, and we get that all set up, and he goes out to lunch, and he comes back, and everyone's dead. What if we had that concept that we set up a scene, and then we roll to determine which outside force, an NPC, the mystery itself, something else, intrudes on the scene and starts a conflict. And so we can then react to that and deal with that as characters, and we can choose which element of that to respond to. One of the things I mentioned on Google Plus is the idea that maybe you can. So let's say we have those three attributes. What if whichever one we respond to, we can sort of knock off, but the other ones get stronger? So perhaps we decide. So perhaps we roll for each one of those, and we determine which one is dominant. So one of them rolls high, one of them rolls medium, one of them rolls low. Each one has some base score based on the kind of game we want. Mystery is maybe gets a high starting bonus. Other things get a low starting bonus. How's that going? Going okay. No, it's not. I have a jam already. Really? What's the deal? Oh, gosh. You got filament? Sorry, guys. Cancel. Gonna take a minute because it's in the middle of that. Okay, so we have these three attributes, and we can combine them and put them in different ways. So let's say we decide that the mystery is dominant in this particular scene. So we know that we're going to have some major odd thing happen, and then depending on the game, maybe we can just straight roll up on a table to determine what's what mysterious thing is threatening us, and that can be very much based on genre. So we use that to determine, okay, kind of what's going on. Yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and switch out the spools because I'm just having nothing but problems with this one, which is surprising because this is a very nice filament maker. Joe asked if this is for the League of Doom game. It is not, probably, although it might be. Well, actually, it might be. I've been struggling to define exactly how the League of Doom game is going to work. For those curious, Joe gave me the idea to do a Legion of Doom Super Friends era style game, and I just haven't been able to find a good, really good structure for that. So, hello. Oh, it's too cold. Gotta reheat it. This actually comes from the from Dan Maroshak's talk about or posts about Mouse Guard and his views on Mouse Guard. So we have our various elements. So again, so the mystery is a genre-specific thing. So we think in terms of, say, a horror movie. The mystery could be something about, you know, a mystery about one of your friends, a mystery about a family member, a mystery about, let's see here, someone else in the town, stuff like that. Mystery about something that you did in the past. So you can have those things, and once you determine which one those are, and once you determine that is the thing that this scene is about, then you play that out. You know, you just say, okay, obviously this happens. Obviously, let's say it's a friend. So you have a scene with your friend, and something strange happens with the friend, and so you can define that and play it out. And then there need to be something at the end of the scene to determine how your character is affected by that. That should come out partly from playing the scene, but also be a sort of a way of doing advancement. Not character advancement in the sense of getting stronger, but in a way of keeping track of what's happening to your character. Does Mouse Guard do this? There's a game. No, there was some game I was reading where you keep track of a couple of different scores, which determine basically how your character is doing over the course of the game. It's sort of a Cthulhu-style thing. We're kind of keeping track of your sanity and your vigor and things like that to get a sense of how close you are to getting knocked out, basically, or getting messed up. So maybe we have trackers like that, which track, okay, you're doing you know, this revelation affects your mental stability in some way. And again, push that score up somewhere, which is a bad thing. You know, I guess maybe pushing it downwards. I don't know. Point being that you add stress onto that, so kind of a stress track. And then in the next scene, again, you roll again to determine what's going on. But the important thing being that the oh, now here we go. So that mystery is introduced. You get to sort of play that out. Then you get to decide which thing you're going to deal with. Are you going to deal with that mystery? Are you going to deal with NPCs and kind of keep the NPCs stable and dealt with? Or are you going to deal with some with the larger organization that's involved? So maybe you don't want to deal with a friend at this point. You want to keep the NPCs, investigate the NPCs and move further on there. If you do that, then the score in the NPCs stays stable, but the score in mystery goes up, and the score in the bad organization goes up, larger organization. Or maybe because that's quickly going to scale out of control to a point where the players can't deal with it, which means that either we create a system to allow that to crash over the players and the players to deal with that, or we scale that back so that only one thing is being pushed up at any one time. that might be genre specific. In a horror game, you're going to have just more and more things piling on you. Also, a more gritty game, a noir story. But if you're trying to, and here's another example where imagine trying to simulate Chinatown in an RPG. But that would be a great example where you have all these various forces building up. In other literary genres, though, you don't have huge things. What is that thing on my? In other genres, you don't have lots of things piling up against the character necessarily all at once. So perhaps you choose the one primary thing that's happening in the scene, and the player can choose to respond to that, in which case something else goes up, maybe of their choosing or chosen randomly, or they go after something else, in which case the primary thing goes up. Either way. So you have that, and then as the story progresses, you would have something trigger when any one of those three stats gets to a certain point. Sort of a limit break thing, or if any of them gets to 5 points, then suddenly everything comes crashing down on the players, and they have to deal with something big. In the case of the mystery, then somebody comes after them, let's say. Again, this could be genre specific. This could be something you roll on the table to say, okay, you've hit this limit break. You have to deal with this big thing that is a common trope of this genre. NPCs, suddenly an NPC turns on you. An NPC betrays you. An NPC dies. An NPC comes back from the dead. All that stuff. The big organization, something goes with it. An external force shows up. The FBI agent shows up. The mysterious FBI agent, or the army moves in, or the mayor turns against you. Whatever. So you have that idea, and then once that happens, the advantage is that perhaps at that point that attribute clears. So that goes back down to 0 or something, but the players have to deal with this big thing. And indeed, perhaps in those limit break scenes, their scores, the player tracker scores or the player character tracker scores are affected double than what they normally are. They're taking extra stress, if you will. And again, this kind of goes back to the fact that the characters are basically accumulating stress and problems over the course of the story. The rules aren't about how they are succeeding all the time. That makes for a dull drama. So then the question becomes, how do we represent what the characters can and can't do? How do we make sure that the characters aren't just all faceless, nameless things? How do we give them attributes that lets the players play them in an interesting way? I think this comes back to what I was talking about before. I would be much more interested in a game where forgot about that. There we go. I'd be much more interested in a game where where character creation is about me answering questions about my character's personality. I don't care how strong my character is or how intelligent my character is, unless that is something I can justify from that character's personality. That stuff may be useful in the game, but from a dramatic perspective, it don't matter. And this gets back to drama. The protagonists and other characters in fiction rarely differ dramatically in their different strength, dex, int scores. That's a little unfair. More accurately, there are very few characters in fiction that have a strength of 18. Or an int of 18, or whatever. A lot of them are pretty standard people in terms of, few of them are superhuman in terms of their ability to bash down doors or other things like that. It's more subtle than that. What makes Harry Dresden interesting is not that he's the smartest person in the room, not that he's the strongest person in the room, but that he has grit and determination. Something you don't get out of the standard attributes. What makes Paul Atreides interesting is that, yes, he is the Kwisatz Haderach, but he also has these personality traits that make him a very effective leader. And it's not having, and again, it's one of the problems, especially, well, what would Paul be? High int, high whiz, high charisma, high dexterity, low to mediocre strength. But it's like, is that really an interesting character to play? No, but what he is put into, the situation he's put into, taxes him to the utmost, because that situation is about culture. It's about leading a people who are dispossessed and dissatisfied. That's interesting. And that's the kind of stuff our games do not do a good job of helping us play through. So let's think about this a little bit more while I swap this out. I'm going to try a different roll. I need to make a bad guy. Haven't done much with black. Let's do... Actually, no. What kind of enemies can I print? This is one of the cool things about this world. Is you can ask these questions. I'm going to make a creature, and I want to see what I can do. Actually, I think I'll go white, and I'll print just a creature. I recall seeing there were some things that were kind of nicely put together that you could print like with support. Oh, yes. Sure about that. The goblin. How does that goblin look? Pretty blocky. That's not too bad. But of course I have to sign in. And download them. Don't have many goblins, so I'm going to go ahead and print that out. Then we'll think about this a little bit more. Oh, good. And that's a nice size. I'll go ahead and do a high quality version of that. Looks pretty decent, but that's not. Oh, it needs support. Dang it, that's the problem. I'm surprised I don't list that anywhere. I should fix that. So, one sec. Can't believe I don't have this. Any of these just kind of sitting here. What's a Mithrin Star Strider? Oh, weird sort of alien thing. Interesting, but no. Starfish. Interesting. A feline. Yeah. Just kind of weird. Spider. Spider. That's big, though. Already printed the tentacle. Let's do something interesting. The lioness looks interesting. She's going to need support, though. Oh, yeah, the frog friend. Yeah, that's a nice, creepy thing. We'll grab that. And we have frog fiend. Oh, but it's huge. Well, we'll give it a minute. All right, do I have any comments yet? Oh, a few. Cool. Cool. Thanks for stopping by, Trey. Dune and Dresden references in the same example. Yeah, that's the thing, is that we need something that deals with that interestingly. So let's think for a bit. Let's recap. So we have these various elements of drama, of things that can move a story forward. We have various stresses that a character can take. The nature, the exact nature of those drama attributes, if you will, the exact things that you're dealing with will tend to dictate what kind of stress you'll take. It should be fairly straightforward. I think we can make that reasonably obvious in a game, that you take mental stress for this, or physical stress, or what have you. And again, the game would say, okay, you increase this stress by this much for this kind of a thing. That's certainly doable. The question is now, what happens when those character attributes, those stress tracks, hit some level? And this gets back to drama. In D&D, you get knocked out of the story for a while. Not a terrible idea, but not the way it happens in drama. Or more accurately, that does happen occasionally in drama, noir fiction being a great example, where things go really bad, your character gets beaten up and left in a puddle somewhere, and then has to collect himself and go up. It's almost always a him. So, how do we deal with that? What do we? Let me set up this frog friend. That's awfully big. That's better. Drop. Slice him up. He deserves a weird color. I think yellow makes sense for him. I don't have a green, unfortunately. So let's try yellow for him. Clip off anything that's marred. Well, nice and tight. Well, I know you can do it. So we can treat that kind of like the other elements are treated. We can treat that kind of like how once one of those stress tracks hits something, then it clears when something major happens, right? The idea is your character is taking some major amount of stress. And so what they're going to do is something that endangers him or her. Something that gets them in worse danger. So what that might do, for example, is increase a stress track's maximum. So instead of needing to get to 5, instead it's going to need to get to, oh, actually, no, I'm sorry, decrease the stress track's maximum. So instead of needing to get to 5 to trigger something, now we only need to get to 4 to trigger that thing, which ups the stakes. Moreover, that should be a permanent thing for the session, for the story, so that the more you, as soon as you do that, suddenly the game is going to, that's going to trigger more often, for the rest of the story, because it's now more powerful. Your failure, your overwhelm in the face of this has caused this thing to become more powerful and more likely. That can be interesting. I don't like hearing clicking. Not jam though. Now it's sounding okay, but I'm just not seeing anything extrude. Why is that? Granted, it didn't go down that far. Yeah, no, it's jammed. Might be able to get that going again. There it's going. Kind of. No, it's not. Dang it. What's wrong with this printer? Oh, that just didn't go in at all. Okay, what's the deal? There's nothing problematic with that. That's okay. There's nothing problematic with the gear. I was able to get stuff down in. So this tells me it's more of a printer problem than a filament problem. Sorry, I know you're kind of looking at my ass right now. It's not very interesting. Where do I see? There we go. This is the disadvantage of doing two things at once, but I kind of can't focus too much right now. Hoping that one would kind of feed the other. But this is quite frustrating that my printer doesn't want to print. This is the life of owning a 3D printer, ladies and gentlemen. It's not that easy. Oh no, I've got a real jam in there. Something's stuck. That's unfortunate. I'm going to have to take this apart. Okay. Can I? Yeah. I have to keep it warm. No, I'll shut it off. Or I'll turn off the heat. We'll see what's in there. But what happens? What happens when a character's stress track hits that thing from a story perspective, not just in terms of it lowering that trigger point? What happens to the character? Well, we think back to drama. The character's overwhelmed. Something really bad happened, and they now have to deal with that and figure out what it means. It could be that happening literally triggers one of the larger elements to trigger, even prematurely. Which again would kind of make sense from a dramatic perspective, that something has come up. I'm not actually seeing anything in there jammed. And there is something in there jammed. Gotta do it. I do wish that there was a version of this design where the motor didn't have to sit on one side of this while it has to kind of hang off while I'm fixing it, which is not great for the cables. Yeah, it's better. Okay. Oh, I need to raise it up there. So that's an idea, is to represent drama through these major moments in the storyline. And this goes back to that question of, okay, what is that? What is that major change to the story? What does that look like in a story? That was quite loose. That could be part of it. Maybe I just had some screws loose, so to speak. Certainly possible. Yeah, so those should be when we hit a limit break, a larger force intervenes. The larger force intervenes in such a way that blocks the main characters. Now, we should set it up so that when the characters are blocked, the characters should know how to unblock themselves. That should be clear in the fiction. That should be clear in the game. We should provide players with the directions and the pieces they need to know, oh, okay, so we have that blockage. Here's how we're going to deal with that. Here's how we're going to here's how we're going to win out of that. Oh yeah, that's jammed in there. So that last one just was really unhappy. How am I going to get that out? I'll have to wait for it to cool and pull out the tweezers. Actually, it might be okay now. Where are my tweezers? They were right here. Yeah, there. Yeah, it should be cooling enough that I can pull that out, I'm hoping. Oh, no. Oh, okay, good. There's a little bit of plastic right at the top that gotten jammed in there. I can test that by pushing some filament down in there. Yeah, I think. Yeah. Goes down somewhat. Of course, it's not going to go down the whole way anyway. But I'm confident that's sufficient. Okay, so I think I've come up with something useful. So now it's a matter of writing that up and play testing it. So hopefully you all hear that. And by the way, by writing up and play testing it, I mean you guys feel free to do this too. So your character is made up of a background and a series of stress tracks. And that background can be complicated, can be made up of several things, and should lead to some kind of a personality profile, some kind of personality, a set of personality descriptors. Maybe the game comes with a set. Like in the Whispering Road, there are a bunch of character traits, and you choose 5 of them, and they kind of describe your character. You could do something like that. And then you have those stress tracks, which are genre specific. And then your game says, all right, here are the different pieces of the larger world that can impact the characters. Some mystery, which is kind of a specific plot, which the players can discover over the course of the game, gumshoe style. There are NPCs that can interject with their own agendas, and there are larger organizations that can intervene. And yes, I recognize that organizations are run by individuals, but I'm thinking more in terms of, again, the CIA, the Men in Black, organizations with specific agendas where that agenda exists no matter who is leading the organization at any given time. So, those 3 all exist, and again, can be defined in your game for whatever your game is trying to model. Those stress tracks for your players normally start at 0, and when you start the game, we'll say that we'll give you 5 points to distribute amongst those 3 larger attributes: mysteries, NPCs, and organizations. And that's kind of where they start, where the game begins. And then you start your story with the characters, and you roll to determine whether it's mysteries or NPCs or an organization that initially comes into conflict with them. And then you roll on a chart to determine what that is, again, genre specific. And then the players respond to that and deal with that. And then they get to decide which of those they're going to actually deal with in the scene. Which of those they're going to I was going to say attack, but that's not quite right. Which one they're going to focus on in that scene. And by doing so, the mystery moves forward. They get some clue. The NPCs are kind of held at bay. They're held in stasis, so none of their plans move forward, or the organizations are held in stasis. Then at the end of the scene, you figure out, okay, which of the other ones move forward and how, and then how do the players, probably actually swap these. First off, how are the players' stress tracks affected? So they all, every player has to have one stress track go up somewhere. And then, and that could be a choice by the player, which one do you want to increase? You could even do it, again, if you want to randomize this, you could give the player the opportunity to roll fudge dice to say, okay, and just straight fudge dice, saying you might get higher, you might get lower. Up to you. You can push it. So it's going to be a 1, but you can roll to see if you get a little bit more or a little bit less. That's an interesting option. You can do something along those lines, randomization-wise. Then you have your excuse me. Then you figure out how those other elements react. DM would probably do that as a separate action, and you start a new scene. There you go. Let's see how that works. It'd be also interesting to see, do you have one player character as the focus character of that scene, or do you just kind of have all the characters in there moving forward? I don't know. Let's play test it and find out. So that's the thought. I'm curious to see where that would go, if it would be even more effective. Looking back to Trey. Thanks, Trey, for those comments. Yeah, I'm sure all this has been done before, by the way, somewhere. But the idea is to... the question is not so much, has it been done before? The question is, how do we model drama and story in a role-playing game? Yeah. What tools can we give to players and GMs, if we have a GM? The GM's a role. So how do we give that to our players in a way that lets them move forward, that gives them the structures that can help them tell a story, instead of saying, okay, you're going to tell a sci-fi story, here's the stats for your armor, and your character's sort of physical and mental attributes, as opposed to here's how to tell a story in this thing. I think that's much more interesting, and those are much more interesting rules than rules for the difference between the damage for a small pistol versus a large pistol. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but when I'm playing a game, I want here we go. When I'm playing a game, I am more interested in making sure that the story is compelling and that I have interesting things to do than whether the weapons are perfectly balanced against each other. That's all well and good, but if the story's boring, I'm out. Doesn't matter how crunchy or fluffy the game is. So yeah, so let's see where that goes. It's all about drama. It's all about pushing the characters in difficult situations and seeing how they struggle out of it. I'm convinced that even gamers who kind of don't like this, if you put their character in a difficult situation, they'll find a way out of it. They'll find a way to get their character to succeed, if you will. So it's, so games should be finding ways to put characters in precarious situations. It should be giving the GM or the players with the shared GM role the tools to put themselves in those tough situations so that they can wriggle themselves out. I think that's how it is, and I want to see tools and mechanics for that. That's I think interesting. So we'll see where it goes. Anyway, I think I have rambled on for long enough. Thank you all for watching. I hope this is helpful.